The smell came first. Not hunger, not fear, not even the sharp animal awareness of being watched, but something softer, almost indecent in its gentleness. Warm bread, or the memory of it, carried thinly through the evening air, like a rumour no one dared believe. It drifted past the wire, slipped through wool collars and unwashed hair, settled somewhere behind the ribs where memory lived. And then it lingered. Too long. Too insistently. The men did not look at one another when they noticed it. They stood in loose formation near the edge of the yard, boots sinking slightly into damp earth, breath lifting in pale threads. Someone coughed. Someone shifted. No one spoke. The sky above had already begun to dim into that quiet blue that comes just before cold takes hold, when the last light clings to treetops and refuses to descend. Beyond the fence there was a house. That much had been clear from the moment they arrived earlier that day, though no one had mentioned it directly. It stood at a distance that made it feel both near and unreachable, its windows faintly lit, its roof holding the last of the day's warmth. Smoke rose from its chimney in a thin, steady line, dissolving into the evening. Ordinary. Painfully ordinary. A man near the front, broad-shouldered, his coat hanging unevenly where a button had been torn away, spoke without turning his head. "They cook like this every night," he said. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the open space around them. The man beside him let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if it had carried any warmth. "You think they forget we're here?" No one answered. It was not the kind of question meant to be answered. A younger figure, barely more than a boy, shifted his weight from one foot to the other, eyes fixed on the house as though it might vanish if he blinked. He had not spoken since midday. His hands, raw at the knuckles, hung loosely at his sides, fingers twitching now and then, as if remembering a task they no longer had. The older one, the one they listened to without acknowledging that they did, tilted his head slightly, as if measuring the distance between the yard and the door. "No," he said at last. "They remember." The words settled differently. He did not elaborate. He never did. There was movement near the gate. A figure approached, steady, unhurried, the kind of movement that suggested not authority in the loud, forceful sense, but something quieter, more certain. The guard. Though the word did not quite fit him, not in the way they had come to understand it elsewhere. He carried no visible urgency, no raised voice, no sharp gestures, just a presence that seemed to hold the space around him in a kind of order. He stopped a few paces from them, looked across the small group as if counting without numbers, then spoke. "You'll come with me." The words were plain, unadorned, almost gentle. For a moment, nothing moved. The broad-shouldered man's jaw tightened, his gaze dropping to the ground. The younger one looked quickly to the older figure, searching for something, permission, refusal, anything that might give shape to what this meant. The skeptical voice came again, sharper this time, though still restrained. "For what?" The guard met his eyes without hostility. "Supper." The word did not land as it should have. It did not fit the place, the context, the quiet weight of everything that had come before. It hung there, fragile, almost absurd. Someone exhaled, slow and deliberate, as if testing whether the air itself had changed. "We eat here," the broad-shouldered man said, though it sounded more like a statement of habit than a protest. The guard nodded once. "Tonight you'll sit with the family." Silence. Not the usual kind, not the weary, resigned quiet that had become second nature, but something tighter, more fragile, stretched thin between disbelief and suspicion. The younger one swallowed, his throat moving visibly. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The guard's expression did not shift. "Because there is room." No one moved immediately. It was not refusal, not exactly. It was something closer to disorientation, as though the ground beneath them had shifted just enough to unsettle their balance. The older man finally stepped forward, slow, deliberate, each movement considered. He did not look back. The others followed, not out of obedience, but because there was no clear reason not to, and that absence itself felt unsettling. They walked in a loose line, boots pressing into the same damp earth, the fence receding behind them with a quiet finality. The house grew larger with each step, its details sharpening, the worn edges of the doorframe, the faint smudge of soot near the chimney, the soft flicker of light through the curtains. The smell intensified. Bread, yes, but also something else. Stew, perhaps, or meat, the kind that had once been ordinary, unremarkable, part of a life that now felt distant and uncertain. The younger one slowed, just slightly, his eyes fixed on the window where shadows moved, figures inside, shifting, reaching, living. "It's a mistake," the skeptical voice muttered behind him. "It has to be." The older man did not turn. "Then we'll see it for what it is." They reached the door. It opened before the guard could knock. A woman stood there, her posture straight, her hands folded loosely in front of her. Her face was not unkind, but it was not soft either. It held the weight of someone who had seen enough to measure each moment carefully. She looked at them. Not quickly, not dismissively, but fully, as if acknowledging their presence required a certain completeness. "Come in," she said. Inside, the air was warm, not just in temperature, but in texture, in the way it seemed to settle gently against the skin. The room was small, its walls lined with simple furnishings, a table, a few chairs, a narrow shelf holding items that spoke of continuity rather than abundance. A lamp cast a steady glow, its light pooling softly across the wooden surface of the table. There were places set, more than they expected. The younger one stopped just inside the doorway, his breath catching slightly. His eyes moved from the table to the faces within the room. A man seated near the far end, his posture composed, a child beside him, small, quiet, watching with a kind of careful curiosity. No one spoke for a moment. The silence here was different. It was not empty. It was full, dense with unspoken things, with questions that did not yet have a place to land. The guard stepped aside, allowing them space. "Sit," he said. They did, slowly, awkwardly, as though each movement had to be relearned. The chairs creaked softly under their weight. Hands rested uncertainly on the table, fingers curling and uncurling against the worn wood. The woman moved between them with quiet efficiency, placing bowls, passing bread, her gestures measured, neither hurried nor hesitant. The skeptical one watched her closely, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Why?" he said again, more to the room than to any one person. The man at the far end of the table looked up, meeting his gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, steady, carrying a kind of quiet certainty that did not demand agreement. "Because we eat every night," he said, "and tonight you are here." It was not an explanation, not really, but it was something. The younger one reached for the bread, then stopped, his hand hovering just above it, as if unsure whether the gesture itself might break something delicate. The child beside the man leaned slightly closer, watching him. "It's warm," the child said softly. The younger one glanced at him, then at the bread, then finally took it, his fingers brushing the crust. He flinched, just slightly, as if the warmth itself had surprised him. No one rushed. No one filled the silence with unnecessary words. They ate. Slowly at first, then with a growing steadiness, each bite grounding them in something that felt almost forgotten. The skeptical one chewed carefully, his gaze still sharp, still searching. "You expect something," he said after a time. The woman shook her head. "No." "Nothing?" "Nothing." He studied her, as if trying to find the edge of the statement, the place where it might give way to something more familiar. Bargain, demand, condition. He found none. The older man set his spoon down, his eyes moving across the table, taking in each face, each small gesture, the way the child held his cup with both hands, the way the woman adjusted the placement of a bowl without looking, the way the man at the end of the table watched, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet attentiveness. "It's strange," the older man said. The man at the far end nodded slightly. "Yes." A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Most things are." There was a faint sound, something close to a laugh, though it did not fully form. It came from the broad-shouldered man, unexpected, brief, gone as quickly as it had appeared. The tension shifted. Not gone, not resolved, but altered, just enough to allow something else to exist alongside it. The meal continued. The light dimmed slightly as the evening deepened, the shadows in the room growing softer, less defined. Outside, the cold settled in, pressing quietly against the walls, a reminder of the world beyond this small, contained space. The younger one finished his bread, his fingers lingering on the table, tracing the grain of the wood as if committing it to memory. He looked up, his voice barely audible. "Why us?" The woman paused, her hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. She considered the question, not dismissing it, not rushing to answer. Then she spoke. "Because you were there." It was not satisfying. It was not complete. But it was true, in the way that simple things often are. The younger one nodded slowly, as if accepting something he did not fully understand. The older man leaned back slightly, his gaze drifting toward the window, where the last light had faded completely, leaving only the reflection of the room within the glass. "We thought," he said quietly, "it would be different." The man at the far end of the table met his reflection in the window. "It is," he said. The words hung there, suspended between them, carrying a weight that was not heavy, but steady, like something that would remain long after the moment had passed. No one argued. No one agreed. They simply sat, the warmth of the room settling deeper, the quiet stretching gently around them. Later, when they stepped back outside, the cold met them again, sharp, immediate, undeniable. The yard was the same. The fence stood where it had always stood. The sky, now fully dark, held no trace of the earlier light. And yet, something had shifted, though none of them could name it without diminishing it. The younger one lingered a moment longer than the others, his breath visible in the night air. He looked back at the house, at the faint glow still visible through the window, at the place where warmth had been offered without condition. "It doesn't change anything," the sceptical voice said, though it sounded less certain now. The older man stood beside the younger one, his gaze steady. "No," he said. A pause, then, softer, almost to himself, "But it stays." The younger one nodded, though he did not fully understand. Not yet. Perhaps not ever in a way that could be explained. But he felt it, somewhere beneath the surface, a small, quiet presence that resisted the cold, the wire, the weight of everything that had come before. They returned to their places, to the routines that defined their days, the boundaries that shaped their world. Nothing had changed. And yet, in the quiet spaces between moments, something remained, an image, a sensation, the memory of warmth held briefly in their hands. It would not free them. It would not undo what had been done, but it would linger, persistent, unyielding in its softness. And in time, perhaps, that would be its own kind of resistance. Because sometimes it is not the walls that define a place, nor the fences that enclose it, but the small, unguarded moments that slip through them, unnoticed at first, and then impossible to forget. And sometimes the quietest gesture is the one that refuses to leave. 1. A dimly lit farmhouse kitchen, a long wooden table surrounded by tense, silent men in worn coats. A single oil lamp casting harsh shadows across their faces. High contrast black and white, focus on expressions of uncertainty and restraint. 2. A close-up of rough, trembling hands, breaking a piece of warm bread, steam rising into cold air, deep shadows emphasizing texture and emotion, black and white, high contrast. 3. A group of weary prisoners walking toward a small, glowing house in the distance, surrounded by darkness and bare trees, their silhouettes stark against the pale sky, black and white, cinematic contrast. 4. A quiet child at the dinner table, watching a gaunt man cautiously eat, their faces illuminated by soft lamplight. Strong contrast between innocence and hardship, black and white portrait style. 5. A woman standing in a doorway, calm and composed, her face half in shadow, half in light, evoking quiet strength and ambiguity, black and white high contrast. 6. A reflective window scene, showing both the interior warmth of a family dinner and the faint, ghostly reflection of the men, layered composition, black and white, with strong tonal separation. 7. A final exterior shot of the cold yard at night, barbed wire fence in sharp silhouette, distant house glowing softly, a lone figure looking back, black and white, high emotional contrast.